Welcome to Trends in the World. Today we are going to explore one of the most terrifying days in American history. But before we begin, smash that subscribe button so you can stay engaged with me. September 11, 2001. A horrifying day that shook America to its core. A day that perhaps changed the world forever. Even after more than 20 years, the effects of this day can be seen in your daily life. You won't believe how this day has impacted your life. Come, let's try to understand it in today's video.
What came down though? What came down? We crashed. The other trade center's down. It's down. It's down.
It was the morning of 11th September. American Airlines Flight 11 takes off from Boston's International Airport. The destination of this flight was Los Angeles. Around 92 people were aboard this airplane, of whom 11 were crew members and 81 were passengers. About 15 minutes after the flight took off, it came to be known that of the 81 passengers, 5 were hijackers. These hijackers hijacked the plane by overpowering the passengers and forcing their way into the cockpit. One of them was Muhammad Atta. He was trained as a pilot. By nationality, he was an Egyptian and was 33 years old. He took control of the plane from the pilot and the co-pilot and flew the plane straight towards the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center was a monumental historic building in America at that time, and at one point it was the tallest building in the world. It was a pride of New York. The hijackers crashed the plane into the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
A big explosion has just occurred. Everyone is running from the entire financial district now. The smoke is filling the entire area. Let's go! Come on, go! Back, go!
The crash took place in the morning. At that time, the President of the USA, George Bush, was on a tour of a school in Florida. While he was on the way, his White House Chief of Staff was informed of this crash. He tells George Bush, but Bush could not believe it. He says that it's unbelievable that anyone could even do that. He speculated that surely the pilot would have suffered a heart attack, which is why the plane crashed into the building. How else could it happen? Only 7 minutes later, it comes to be known that United Airlines Flight 175 had also been hijacked by 5 hijackers. Once again, the hijackers overpowered the pilots and took control of the plane. Because only 17 minutes after the first crash, these hijackers once again turned towards the World Trade Center and crashed the plane into the South Tower. The second crash into the second tower. By this time, the US President George Bush had reached the school and was in a classroom with second-grade children. He was in the midst of a reading exercise named the Pet Code. This time, his Chief of Staff, Andrew Gade, went into the classroom and whispered into his ear, "America is under attack." But George Bush stayed in the classroom. He continued the reading exercise for the next 7 minutes. The exercise continued. He interacted with the children, took photos with them and the teachers, and complimented the children. These 7 minutes were very critical because in these 7 minutes, the news spread worldwide that 2 planes crashed into the World Trade Center. Later, many people criticized George Bush for this, asking why he did not take immediate action. When it was known that 2 planes were hijacked, America was attacked, and there were crashes, he remained in the classroom in those minutes, ignoring all these. A few minutes after the second plane crash, the news of 2 more planes being hijacked came in. One was American Airlines Flight 77. It had taken off from Washington's International Airport. This flight was headed to Los Angeles and was also carrying 5 hijackers. The second flight was United Airlines Flight 93. The flight was going from New Jersey to California. Apparently, it had 4 hijackers. Both flights were rerouted to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States of America. On the outskirts of Washington, D.C. is the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense, known as the Pentagon. The Pentagon is an iconic building too. Hijackers turned Flight 77 towards this. the Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon building. At this point, after the third crash, the entire airspace of United States was shut down. All the airplanes in the air were ordered to land on their nearest airport. The third crash into the Pentagon building took place at 9:37 a.m. Because of this, a significant portion of the Pentagon was destroyed. At 9:59 a.m., due to the plane crash into the South Tower, the whole building had caught on fire. Because of fire and the crash, the structure of building weakened and the entire building collapsed. The South Tower fell. During this time, everyone was scared of the fourth hijacked plane. United Airlines Flight 93, the fourth plane to have been hijacked, people were scared about where the hijackers would crash the plane. It was suspected that the plane would be crashed into the White House or the US Capitol. The White House is also a very important place for the United States because this is the residence of US President. The United States Capitol building is the legislative seat of the US federal government. So it was suspected that the target of the fourth plane would either be the White House or the Capitol Hill building. On the other hand, the people on this airplane, some of them have turned on their phones when the plane was hijacked. They started getting phone calls from their family members. They told them about what was happening in America then. The three planes were crashed, the World Trade Center was attacked, and the World Trade Center had collapsed. Soon the passengers in the plane realized what was happening. Their plane was also hijacked. And like the other hijacked planes, it could also be crashed. They did not have any options. They could either sit back and watch the hijackers crash that plane too, or they could be brave and fight the hijackers. And guess what? These people showed the courage to fight the hijackers. The common people sitting in the United Airlines Flight 93 started to fight back against the hijackers. There was an uproar in the plane. The next part of the story is not clear about what exactly happened in the plane, but there are audio recordings from the plane that you can still listen today. But we don't exactly know if the passengers fighting back could actually reach the cockpit or not, or if they could overpower the hijackers. We don't know this. But we do know that the passengers tried to fight back and eventually the plane crash landed in a field, in an empty field. One thing is certain, because of the bravery of the passengers, the lives of many people were saved. By this time, the horrific morning turned into noon for America. It was revealed that a total of more than 3,000 people had died across the incident, and more than 6,000 people were injured. Several were killed in the Pentagon and several in the World Trade Center. And the terrorist group Al Qaeda was behind this attack. But a few days after this 9/11 attack, Osama bin Laden released a statement saying that he is not responsible for it. He denied any responsibility, but in the 2004 US elections, about 3 years after this incident, a public tape recording was published by Osama bin Laden, where he acknowledged the attack and took responsibility for it. Osama justified it by saying that there were several motivations of Al Qaeda behind carrying out these attacks. The interference of the US in the Middle East, the US supporting Israel, supporting actions against Muslims in Lebanon, supporting Russia in crimes against Muslims in Chechnya, the US collaboration with Saudi Arabia, sending its troops to Saudi Arabia. Osama listed down several reasons saying that this was why they attacked America, that they were basically trying to teach a lesson to America. The main conclusion of all the reasons was that they were doing so because the Muslims were being abused. The 9/11 Commission report named Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as the principal architect behind these attacks. He was also involved in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Along with four others, he was detained. On the other hand, Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the attacks, was killed in 2011. Here the bigger question remains, how did these attacks affect the life of ordinary people, not just in America but globally? 6 weeks after 9/11, the US Congress rushed to pass the Patriot Act. Many politicians did not even read it before voting, and there was no real discussion or amendments. This act gave the US government sweeping powers to spy on its citizens. The government could access personal documents, books, and records without informing individuals. The judiciary's power was also weakened. Another major shift after 9/11 was in airport security. Before the attack, security checks at airports were minimal. Passengers only needed to check their IDs and the security was almost non-existent. But after 9/11, everything changed. Full body scans, personal ID checks, passport verification, and tight restrictions on liquid became the norm. Airports also deployed explosive detection systems, and the pilots were armed for the first time in history. In response to 9/11, the US invaded Afghanistan to dismantle terrorist networks. However, the United States remained in Afghanistan for 20 years. While Osama bin Laden was killed, the wars in the Middle East cost trillions of dollars and countless soldiers and civilians lost their lives. The US also invaded Iraq, further inflaming tensions in the region. The aftermath of 9/11 also saw a disturbing rise in hate crimes, particularly against Muslims and South Asians. In 2001 alone, there were 481 hate crimes against Muslims. After 9/11, many people were arrested without evidence and subjected to torture. Americans largely supported these actions, believing they were justified in the fight against terrorism. Critics, however, claimed that the war on terror was synonymous with torture, and this led to more individuals turning into terrorists out of anger and revenge. This brings us to a simple yet crucial lesson. Extremism breeds extremism. Osama bin Laden said he was taking revenge against the US for its interference in the Middle East. In response, the United States engaged in its own revenge by invading Afghanistan and Iraq. And thus the cycle of revenge continues. When one terrorist is eliminated, another is born. The 9/11 attacks were used as an excuse by government to exploit fear and limit freedoms. The US government used the Patriot Act to spy on its citizens, showing how fear can be manipulated to infringe on rights and justify surveillance. It's crucial that we as citizens don't let fear cloud our judgment and allow governments to take away our freedoms. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more insightful videos from trends in the world. See you in another video. Until then, stay curious, stay informed.